She hit my jaw with the coffee thermos, and the note under it revealed everything she had been hiding for months. Hi, my name's Hazel Knox. I am 77 years old. My daughter-in-law, Lena, has always been a complicated woman. At family gatherings, she smiles, acts polite, and laughs in a way that could fool anyone. But beneath that cheerful exterior, I always sensed something was off. There were moments when she lingered too long on certain conversations, glanced at my son in ways that made my skin crawl, and left the room with secretive smirks that I couldn't understand. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when it all began. I'd brewed my own coffee, as I always do, and was setting my cup on the counter when Lena stormed into the kitchen. The tension in her steps made my heart race. She didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She didn't even glance at my face. Her eyes were fixed on me like a hawk. I felt a sudden jolt as she swung her arm. The coffee thermos hit my jaw. Pain exploded across my face and my knees wobbled. Hot coffee splashed onto the counter and the thermos clattered to the floor. I held my jaw in shock, tears welling up. I couldn't believe she had just done this. But what I noticed immediately was strange. The thermos, which she had carelessly knocked over, revealed a small envelope taped underneath. My curiosity overpowered the pain, and I bent down to peel the tape. Inside was a note. It wasn't just a note, it was meticulous. It detailed a plan, her plan, to manipulate our family finances, to isolate my son, and to make me look incapable and forgetful. Her handwriting was sharp, precise, almost cruel in its clarity. I held the note in my shaking hands, my mind spinning. How long had she been planning this? How many people had she lied to? I remembered the subtle hints, the strange phone calls she had taken in secret, the odd withdrawals from accounts she never had access to. Suddenly it all clicked. This wasn't just a random act of rage. This was calculated. She had hit me not out of anger, but to intimidate, to distract me while she left the note hidden beneath the thermos. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My jaw throbbed, but my mind was sharp. I snapped a photo of the note with my phone and sent it to my son immediately. He called me, his voice trembling. He couldn't believe it. Lena had been manipulating him for months, keeping him away from the truth while plotting against our family. By the time she returned to the room, I was calm. I met her gaze, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I knew the truth, and that knowledge gave me power. She had underestimated me. Over the next few hours, I began piecing together all the evidence I could find. Receipts, messages, strange withdrawals, and suspicious behaviors. Every small detail that once seemed harmless now fit into the pattern outlined in the note. Lena's scheme was massive, and it involved more than just money. She had been plotting to take control over my son's decisions, the family estate, and even personal matters that I thought were private. I realized then that this story wasn't just about a single act of violence. It was about deception, manipulation, and the quiet cruelty that can hide behind a smile. The thermos was her mistake. That small act of violence had revealed her entire strategy, and it was my turn to respond. But I needed to be smart. I needed to gather more proof, document everything, and make sure that when the truth came out, it was undeniable. After discovering the note taped under the coffee thermos, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I couldn't let Lena's plan succeed, but I knew I had to move carefully. Acting impulsively could give her a chance to cover her tracks. I decided to start by investigating her secret communications. Over the past months, I had noticed her sneaking off with her phone, whispering into it, and deleting messages before anyone could see. I didn't know what she was hiding, but now I had a motive to find out. I began checking my own devices, the family tablet, and even the cloud backups we shared. Every time I saw a suspicious notification, my heart raced. Lena was clever, but she wasn't perfect. I remembered a small detail, her habit of leaving her phone on the kitchen counter while she brewed her coffee. That morning after she stormed out, she had left it there. It was unlocked. My hands shook as I picked it up. One knew I was crossing a line, but it was necessary. Scrolling through her messages, I found the first clue. A string of texts to an unknown number. They weren't casual conversations. They were planning something. Detailed instructions about bank accounts, meetings I hadn't been invited to, and even manipulations of my son's daily schedule. Every line confirmed what the note under the thermos had already told me. Lena had been orchestrating this behind our backs for months. Next, I checked her emails. My eyes widened as I found PDF copies of legal documents she had prepared in secret. Some of them bore my son's signature, or what appeared to be it. My stomach sank. The note had warned me about this, but seeing it in her emails made it real. She was trying to make him unknowingly authorize transfers, sign agreements, and commit to plans without his knowledge. I saved screenshots and copies of everything. I knew my son needed to see this, but I also knew I couldn't confront Lena yet. She was unpredictable, and I didn't want her to suspect I had this evidence. My mind raced as I thought about the next steps. How could I use what I had found without putting myself at risk? Later that evening, Lena acted as if nothing had happened. She made small talk, laughed at jokes, and tried to act normal. But I noticed the tension in her eyes when she glanced at me. I held her gaze, silently signaling that I was aware of her secrets. It was a silent warning. I knew, and I was watching. I decided to be strategic. The next few days were spent documenting everything. I reviewed bank statements, emails, and receipts. I checked messages from months ago and saved anything that seemed suspicious. Every tiny inconsistency, every late-night phone call, every unexplained withdrawal became a piece of the puzzle. By the end of the week, I had a detailed timeline of Lena's manipulations. One morning, as I reviewed the documents with my son, I could see the shock on his face. He couldn't believe how deep the deception went. Lena had been operating right under our noses, and we hadn't noticed. But now, with everything compiled, we had the proof we needed. The note under the thermos had been the spark. But the evidence we uncovered afterward was the flame. Lena's plan was exposed bit by bit, and the weight of the truth began to shift the balance of power. I felt a sense of control returning, but I also knew that the confrontation was still ahead. Lena was dangerous, and she wouldn't give up without a fight. That night, as I prepared the documents to show my son again, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and empowerment. We had to act wisely. Every step needed to be calculated. The note under the thermos had started this journey. But the real battle, the exposure of Lena's entire scheme, was only just beginning. The next morning, I woke early, my jaw still throbbing slightly from the thermos incident, but my mind sharper than ever. Lena had no idea that I had found the note, the emails, or the legal documents she had meticulously prepared. Dude, I had a plan. I wouldn't confront her outright yet. Instead, I would observe her, let her actions betray her, and gather even more evidence to make our case undeniable. As I moved around the house, I kept my phone close. I had set it up to record key interactions, not in a creepy way, but simply to protect myself. Lena entered the kitchen, humming a tune she thought was cheerful, her eyes darting around as if she sensed something was off. I pretended to be busy with breakfast, but I could feel the tension in the air. She tried to engage me in small talk, asking about the weather, pretending that nothing had happened. I answered carefully, keeping my tone neutral but firm. "I've been reviewing some family documents," I said casually, making sure my son was within earshot in the next room. "There are a few things we need to discuss later." Her eyes flicked to mine. For a moment, I saw panic there, a small flash of fear that she hadn't expected. She forced a smile, laughing nervously. "Oh, I'm sure everything's fine," she said. But the words didn't match her expression. Later that day, Lena left the house, and I took the opportunity to review more of her online communications. I found subtle hints of her manipulation, messages to friends complaining about me, vague threats about handling certain situations with my son. and notes about financial plans she wanted to execute before anyone could notice. It was chilling to see her calculated strategies laid bare in black and white. When she returned, I decided it was time to plant a subtle warning. I left the note from under the thermos on the kitchen counter, partially visible, as if I had just discovered it again. My son entered shortly after, catching sight of it. Lena froze, realizing that the evidence she thought was hidden might now be seen. She tried to act casual, but her movements were stiff, her smiles forced. I kept my demeanor calm, sipping my tea, watching her reaction. Her facade cracked more with every passing minute. When she finally attempted to engage my son in a casual conversation, he ignored her, focused instead on the note and the other documents I had left visible around the table. Over the next few days, small confrontations began to happen. Lena would make remarks, subtle jabs, attempting to intimidate me. But each time I responded calmly, never raising my voice, letting the evidence do the talking. Every threat, every attempt to gaslight me, only confirmed the truth to my son and strengthened our position. One evening, I found a small notebook she had left behind, filled with meticulous plans about manipulating my son's decisions and keeping control over certain assets. It was the smoking gun. Every page detailed strategies, excuses, and contingencies, showing just how far she had gone. I photographed each page, backing up the evidence on multiple devices. I also began documenting the emotional toll Lena's manipulation had taken on the family. My son was stressed, confused, and torn between loyalty to his wife and the obvious truth. By collecting screenshots, messages, and receipts, I could clearly demonstrate the full scope of her behavior. The tension in the house became palpable. Lena knew something was happening. I could see it in her restless movements, in the way she avoided eye contact with me and my son. The note under the thermos had been the trigger. But now the web of her lies was unraveling, and there was no turning back. That night, as I prepared for the next day, I reflected on the journey so far. The thermos had been her mistake, but my careful observation, documentation, and patience were what gave us the advantage. I wasn't just reacting. I was controlling the narrative, ensuring that when the time came to confront her fully, we would have undeniable proof. By the fourth day, the atmosphere in the house had become almost unbearable. Every glance, every movement carried tension. Lena walked through the rooms like a cat, aware that someone was watching, but not knowing exactly what I had uncovered. I had spent the morning compiling all the evidence, emails, screenshots, receipts, photographs of the note under the thermos, and even the notebook detailing her manipulations. It was overwhelming how methodically she had plotted everything. But finally, we had a clearer picture. My son and I sat together in the living room, reviewing the compiled documents. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to quiet determination. "Mom, I can't believe she tried to do all this behind our backs," he said, shaking his head. I nodded, feeling a mixture of anger and resolve. Lena had underestimated both of us. Later that afternoon, Lena tried to draw me into a conversation, attempting her usual manipulation tactics. "Hazel, why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I simply smiled faintly and said nothing, letting the weight of her own conscience fill the silence. It was time to escalate subtly. I left a few of the documents on the kitchen counter, partially visible. My son noticed them immediately. Lena's eyes widened when she saw him examining the documents, realizing too late that the evidence could no longer be hidden. Her careful stare started to crack as she realized the truth was about to come out. Over the next couple of days, I began contacting key witnesses discreetly. The neighbors who had seen Lena sneaking around suspiciously, the delivery drivers who had observed odd behavior, and even the building staff who had noted her attempts to control access to certain areas. Each witness confirmed parts of the story, building a more complete picture of Lena's manipulations. One evening, Lena confronted me, slamming her hand on the kitchen counter. "What are you doing with my things?" she demanded. I remained calm, letting her rage flow over me without responding. I knew that every outburst she made was evidence in itself. Her temper, combined with the documents and witness statements, would make a strong case for exposing her schemes. I also started leaving small traps, slightly misplaced receipts, documents left in plain sight, and subtle hints to my son and other family members. Each step was carefully calculated to make her own actions reveal her intentions. She didn't notice immediately, but her paranoia grew. She started checking her phone obsessively, double-checking her notes, and looking around the house constantly. By the end of the week, the tension reached a breaking point. Lena realized that her manipulations were no longer working. My calm, patient approach, combined with clear, documented evidence, had stripped her of control. She tried to intimidate me one last time by raising her voice and accusing me of exaggeration. But my son calmly presented the compiled evidence, leaving her speechless. Finally, it was clear that the web of lies she had spun for months was beginning to unravel. She had underestimated not just me, but my son as well. The thermos, the note, and all the follow-up evidence had created an unshakable foundation to expose her completely. That night, I reflected on how far this had come. The thermos had been a violent, shocking act, but it had inadvertently revealed everything. My patient's careful documentation and strategic observation had turned what could have been a moment of fear and chaos into a powerful tool to uncover the truth. Lena's plan, once hidden and secretive, was now fully visible. And the next stage, the final confrontation, was approaching. The following morning, I awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The past few days had been tense, but I could feel the momentum shifting in our favor. Lena had grown restless, constantly glancing over her shoulder, muttering under her breath, and checking her phone more frequently. Her own paranoia was beginning to betray her. I spent the morning reviewing all the evidence again, making sure it was organized and accessible. Every email, every screenshot, every receipt, every note under the thermos, all of it compiled into a digital and physical dossier. My son, sitting beside me, absorbed each detail with growing disbelief and concern. "I can't believe she thought she could get away with this," he said, shaking his head. By midday, I decided it was time to bring in additional witnesses. I discreetly contacted the neighbors who had seen Lena acting suspiciously, as well as the building staff who had noted her aggressive behavior. Each person provided their account of her actions, corroborating the evidence we already had. The picture of her manipulations was becoming more complete with every statement. When Lena returned home that afternoon, she immediately sensed that something was different. I had strategically left a few documents and screenshots visible on the coffee table. She froze when she noticed them. Her eyes flicked nervously between me and my son, her forced smile failing to mask the fear building in her expression. "Hazel, what are you doing with my things?" she demanded, her voice sharp but wavering. I remained calm, letting her frustration grow. My son stepped forward, holding the dossier I had compiled. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "We need to talk about this, Lena. All of it." At that moment, her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. She tried to deny everything, insisting that the documents were fabricated or misinterpreted. But we were prepared. The emails, the receipts, the note under the thermos, the messages, all of it was organized and undeniable. Each piece of evidence connected directly to the actions she had taken over the past months. I watched as Lena's posture shifted from aggression to desperation. Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was none. We had documented everything carefully, and there was no way for her to twist the truth. My son, usually gentle and forgiving, spoke firmly about the patterns he had noticed and the manipulations she had attempted. Every word struck at the heart of her deception. Next, I introduced the statements from witnesses, neighbors, building staff, and even a delivery driver who had noticed unusual behavior. Each account aligned with the evidence, reinforcing the reality of her actions. Lena's defenses weakened further with every corroboration. Her own community was now confirming what we had already documented, leaving her isolated and exposed. I could see the frustration and fear building in her expression. The more she realized that the truth could not be hidden, the more erratic she became. I stayed calm, letting the collected evidence speak for itself. My son and I didn't need to raise our voices. The proof was overwhelming, and she knew it. That evening, after a long, intense confrontation, Lena finally sat down, defeated. She could no longer maintain the lie. The note under the thermos, combined with all the supporting evidence and witness statements, had revealed her full plan. The manipulation, the secrecy, and the attempts to control our family were now fully exposed. As I prepared for the next day, I felt a sense of closure approaching. Lena's carefully plotted scheme had been unraveled by patience, careful documentation, and strategic observation. The thermos had been her mistake, but it had sparked a chain reaction that revealed everything. The next step would be the final confrontation, where all the pieces would come together and the truth would be undeniable. The morning sun streamed through the windows, but the house felt tense, almost electric. Lena had spent the night in restless pacing, her sleep clearly disrupted by the knowledge that her secrets were no longer safe. I could feel it in the air. She was aware that the thermos, the note, and all the evidence had shifted the balance. Today would be the climax. I gathered all the documents one final time, organizing them neatly on the dining table. Emails, receipts, screenshots, witness statements, and the note from under the thermos. Everything was laid out in a way that left no room for doubt. My son stood beside me, his expression a mixture of anger and relief. He had watched quietly as I meticulously compiled the evidence, and now he was ready to face the truth head on. Lena entered the room, her eyes scanning the table. The smile she tried to force quickly faltered. She noticed the dossier, the note, the printouts, each item a piece of her unraveling plan. Her shoulders stiffened, and her usual chatter was replaced by silence. "Hazel, what is all of this?" she asked, trying to maintain a sense of control, though her voice trembled. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I motioned for my son to speak. He stepped forward, holding the note from under the thermos in his hands. "Lena," he said calmly, "we need to talk about everything. We know about the manipulations, the hidden plans, and the messages. We know what you've been trying to do behind our backs." Her face turned pale, and her lips pressed tightly together. She attempted a feeble denial. But the documents on the table and the witness statements I had collected left her with no room to maneuver. Each page, each screenshot, each note directly contradicted her claims. I finally spoke, my voice steady. "This note, Lena, the thermos, is just the beginning. Everything else confirms your plan. You've been manipulating finances, isolating my son, and lying to everyone around you. The witnesses support what we found. You can't deny it." Lena's eyes flicked nervously around the room. She tried to regain control by raising her voice, but the calm confidence in my son's demeanor rendered her outbursts meaningless. The weight of the evidence and the exposure of her plan made her defenses crumble. Over the next hour, we went through the documents systematically. Every email, every message, every receipt that supported the claim was presented. Lena had no counter-arguments. Her lies, her manipulations, and her schemes were laid bare. She realized that the thermos, the seemingly minor act of violence, had triggered an investigation that would reveal her entire plan. Finally, she slumped into a chair, silent and defeated. There was no anger left, only resignation. The note under the thermos, the meticulous documentation, and the witnesses had completely dismantled her attempts at control. My son, looking relieved and vindicated, nodded at me. We had faced the storm, and it had broken under the weight of truth. By the end of the day, Lena's plan had been fully exposed. The documents and witness accounts were ready to be presented if needed to any authority, ensuring she could not manipulate the situation further. The calm that followed was profound. The tension, the fear, the pain had all led to a decisive moment where truth and patience triumphed over deceit and aggression. As I reflected on the events, I realized that the coffee thermos, the initial act of violence, had inadvertently revealed the depths of her plan. Without it, the manipulations might have continued unchecked. Now, the power had shifted and clarity had returned to our family. Lena's actions had been exposed, and we were prepared for the aftermath, strengthened by the knowledge that the truth could not be hidden. The day after the confrontation, the house felt lighter. The oppressive tension that had hung over us for weeks was gone. Lena, once confident and manipulative, now moved quietly, aware that her schemes had been completely revealed. The thermos, the note, and the evidence we had compiled had done what words alone could not. They exposed the full truth. I spent the morning organizing the evidence one last time, preparing a copy for my son to keep. The physical documents, digital backups, and witness statements were all ready in case any further actions were needed. It felt good to know that the truth was safe and undeniable. My son, still processing the events, came into the kitchen with a warm cup of tea for me. "Mom," he said softly, "I can't thank you enough. You stayed calm, collected, and patient, even when she tried to intimidate us. You uncovered everything." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of relief. The fear, the bruises, and the worry had all led to this moment of clarity. Later that day, Lena attempted to speak with my son privately, perhaps hoping to salvage some control, but he firmly refused. He had seen the evidence, understood the manipulation, and was no longer susceptible to her lies. The documents and witnesses had created a barrier she could not cross. I reflected on the journey that had begun with a single act of violence, the coffee thermos striking my jaw. That moment of pain had inadvertently revealed her hidden agenda, sparking an investigation that would expose her completely. The note taped underneath, which could have been dismissed as a small detail, had become the key piece of evidence that unraveled everything. The weeks that followed were calmer. Lena remained in the house, but was noticeably subdued. She no longer tried to manipulate, threaten, or intimidate. The balance of power had shifted, and the family could breathe again. My son and I maintained vigilance, but there was also peace. Knowing that truth and patience had won, I spent time with my son, discussing how to rebuild trust and ensure that the family remained safe from future deception. It was a healing process, and though the memories of Lena's schemes lingered, they no longer held power over us. We were stronger for having faced them together. In the quiet of the evening, I reflected on what had happened. The thermos, the note, the documents, the careful observation, and the patient strategy, and they had all combined to reveal the truth. What began as a shocking act of aggression had ultimately ensured justice within our home. The experience had taught me many things: the importance of vigilance, the value of careful documentation, and the strength that comes from remaining calm and strategic in the face of deception. Most importantly, it showed that truth, patience, and courage could overcome even the most calculated manipulations. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to comment your city below and subscribe for more shocking true stories.